So far about, well, it's really a testimony of recovery. But when we left off before break, you were talking about how you shared your story, and a woman came to you and said that her son, right, had struggled with alcoholism, and she didn't relate to him until she heard your story.
Yeah, she had a younger son who had suffered from substance abuse issues and had passed away. And she, she just related to me that she couldn't understand how he was feeling. She never really could relate. She couldn't understand why he couldn't get over those hurts, and why he couldn't stop using. And
right, yes.
And then when she heard my story, she finally understood, and she went on to form a nonprofit group to help other parents, grieving parents, other family members, who had lost loved ones to substance abuse.
One of my favorite scriptures is Romans 8:28, for we know that in all things God works together for the good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And whenever I hear things like that, that scripture just comes to life, because using it for good. Her son passed away, but she hears your story. God speaks to her in that, and now she's helping people. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's so beautiful. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So so let's get back to your story. So you were shared with us that you had been sexually abused when you were between 6 and 8. And then what happened?
We moved to Michigan, and that went away. That was it didn't come back into my life again. But the one thing that I felt through my childhood is I never felt a part of. I always felt like I was an outsider. I had a lot of little girlfriends. I was popular. I was a good athlete. I was a good student.
Yeah.
But I never felt comfortable in my own skin, and I always tried as hard as I could to be better than everyone else at everything else, so that I could feel, so that I could feel like I was on their level.
Right. Exactly.
And in my early teens, I went through a number of suicide attempts.
And didn't you tell me yesterday, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that your parents also, one of your parents struggled with suicide attempts too, or no?
Well, no. My father and mother both had substance abuse issues.
Okay.
My father has since got sober. He's been sober over 30 years and is now a doctor.
Yeah, that's awesome.
With the VA, so it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
My mother still struggles in her addiction.
Okay.
And it's something that I try to be a light in her life and give her the path, and she knows that if she ever wants help, we're there for her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So throughout your teen years, then you had a couple of suicide attempts. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and it's just I could never feel comfortable. I always felt like the world was coming crashing down on me, and
So do you say you struggle with depression or anxiety or both?
Both.
Okay.
And I'm not sure. A lot of people say that alcoholism is genetic. Others say that it's environmental. The World Health Organization says it's both.
Yeah.
I believe in me it was both, but I believe I was definitely born an alcoholic. I mean, my earliest memories were felt with that. I felt that anxiety and that fear, and that's not normal. And I had told myself that I wasn't going to drink. I wasn't going to be like my parents. And at 15, I had gone to another party and decided that was the time that I was gonna start drinking, and I immediately drank like an alcoholic, and I drank to blackout, and I passed out, and I threw up all over myself, and of course I had a lot of one thing that marked a lot of my drinking is that I surrounded myself with codependent women who were always willing to take care of me.
And so can you, just for our viewers' sake, can you define codependent, what you mean by that?
I was always surrounded by women who were willing to help me. They wanted to take care of me. Fixing me was kind of a route to them feeling better.
Right, exactly. Good.
And my dad says that if you scratch any addict or alcoholic long enough, you'll find a codependent, and I find that in myself as well. I'm reaching out to try to fix people.
That's something I am overcoming too. Yes, I can relate to that. The helper syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I drank like that until I got sober at 35. Really, for a lot of that period, I really was a binge drinker. I spent time in the military, and there were long periods of time, during airborne school, during air assault school, where I just couldn't drink, and that didn't really bother me. I could handle those periods of time, and then as I got older, same thing. I really wouldn't drink a whole lot during the week, and I would absolutely start in on Thursday or Friday night and be done until Sunday night.
So would you say that you were functional in some capacities?
Oh,
I mean, you
absolutely.
carried on a life and all those things. So was there anyone in your life that was like raising a red flag and saying you have a problem, or was it just totally accepted?
No, because I was, generally speaking, until near the end, I was always the fun guy.
Yeah.
People wanted to be around me because we would go out together. We'd go out as a small group and end up being a large group. And,
Yeah.
one of my best friends in Oregon met his wife on one of our nights out, and then things changed.
Yeah.
Things changed when going out and drinking just wasn't enough anymore.
Yeah.
I could not drink enough while I was out.
Yeah.
In order to kind of take away those feelings. So I would start drinking before I went out.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would drink as much as a fifth of whiskey and then go out and drink. And then the bartenders and other people really wouldn't know how much I had drank because I'd only had a few shots while I was at the bar.
Right.
But it always ended up, near the end, it ended up with me so drunk that I couldn't even function. And
Would you drive?
No, I lived close enough. I was living in Nevada City at the time, so I lived close enough that I walked or people would give me rides. There were times that I drove, and really it's just by the grace of God that I'm here, because there are a number of times where I don't remember getting home. There were a number of close calls, and
were you totally in denial with yourself? Did you think you had it under control, or did you think deep down that you had a problem?
No, I knew.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I knew. I didn't know how not to live the way I'd been living.
Yeah, okay. I think that's very common.
Yeah. And near the end, I had a live-in girlfriend, and she had left me. I was no longer going out anymore. I was staying at home. Because I couldn't function anymore. I had been the guy that was always fun, knew all the bartenders, and now I wasn't welcome in a lot of places because I caused a lot of problems. And so I drank at home alone. And for someone who had been as social as I had been for so long, that isolation made things even worse.
So how long did this drinking period go on?
Probably I drank that first time at 15. I didn't drink again till I was 17 or 18. But basically from the time I was 17 or 18 till the time I was 35.
Okay. All right, so you're through your teen years, had attempted suicide a couple of times. Did your parents at that time, say you need help? Your dad, did they know that you were that depressed?
I don't know. I think more than anything, they thought I was I just had problems, and I went to counselors, and I acted out a lot at home. But I think my mom was so caught up in her own addiction, and her alcoholism was really taking off, and her relationship with my stepfather wasn't good. And I spent a lot of time away from home. The summer between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, I didn't even go home. I left at the beginning of the summer, and I didn't come back until school started in the fall. And I stayed with friends, and I slept on the beach for a couple of weeks.
Anywhere but home.
Yeah.
So was there any God in your life at this point?
No. I always had a feeling that there was God, but I didn't know anything. I'd never been to church other than a wedding occasionally here and there. And, it was really unusual. I look at it now, and I look at the youth groups, and I look at the people, how involved some kids are. And I even hear some of the younger people at school at Sac State, talking about Bible studies and things like that. And it's amazing. I either didn't want to hear it, or it just was never mentioned around me, because I was never exposed to any kind of youth group or anything like that. So I didn't know who Jesus was. I knew there was a Bible, I knew there was a Jesus, but I had no idea of his story, the story of salvation, the gospel. I didn't know any of that. And that was something that I wouldn't discover, until I discovered it on my own after I got sober.
And the way that you only have like a minute left before our next break, but the way that you got sober, tell us about that.
I had just gotten to a point where I was at my end, and I knew it, and I knew that I couldn't live the way I was living any longer, and I didn't have a solution for living any other way. And I sat in my living room one night, and I was very inebriated, and I put a gun in my mouth, and for the first time in my life, I made an honest prayer to God, and I asked him to help me take my life.
Wow. That's an unusual first prayer, to ask God to help you take your life. So you would say you were at the end of yourself. Was it fair to say that was your bottom?
That was my bottom. I hadn't been to jail. I hadn't really suffered a lot of major consequences.
Yeah.
But that, for me, was my end, and I knew it.
I think that we have to, sometimes, sadly, for a lot of people, they have to get to their bottom before they look up and acknowledge and surrender to God, So I'm sure you probably hear that story all the time, similar stories all the time in working with recovery. So when we come back, I want to find out, we talked a lot about the before Jesus, and I want to get into how God's changed your life and how he's using you too. It's pretty amazing. But there's more to the story. So we're gonna take a break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.